Tackling white privilege. Gavin McInnes. The backlash from my tackling Asian privilege was so intense it made me feel like a Maxell tape ad. I got a handful of texts, how did they get my number? Dozens of tweets, hundreds of comments, and thousands of Facebook links telling me I'm ignorant and useless and should get my ass kicked. They told me it was a dishonest call to include Asian Americans in discussions on race and suggested I check myself before I wreck myself. So I checked myself. I quit drinking for a day and spent a lot of time staring in the mirror. I gotta be honest, what I saw there made me sick. When I looked inside myself, I felt even more disgusted. It only takes a second to realize I am doing better than others because of privilege. Doye. However, to apply this logic to others is insane. Asians face all kinds of racism and have no privileges. The fact that they were doing better than every other group means they were simply better. White people suck. I would like to take a moment to deeply apologize to all our Asian readers, and also to all our racially aware readers. In particular, I'd like to thank the student at Berkeley who pointed out how similar my essay was to Peggy McIntosh's Invisible Knapsack. That one was a wake-up call. If whites accomplish too much, they probably cheated. If anyone else succeeds, it's due to hard work. In fact, after going over my Tackling Asian Privilege essay, I realized the whole thing ceased to be offensive when I subbed out the word Asian for white. Check it out. Nobody clutches their purse to their side when a white person walks into the elevator. If a white person applies for a job at a bank or on the police force, he or she is often welcomed with open arms, assuming both places have met their diversity quotas. When a white person commits a crime, some people are shocked, assuming he's rich and educated. When a certain type of white man is appointed to the head of the Department of Energy, everyone knowingly nods his or her head. White privilege pervades every part of our day-to-day life, and it's time they joined the conversation about race. Though they comprise 75% of the American population, they make up 47% of all doctors. Only 2.3% of doctors are African American, yet they were 13% of the population. 30% of African American men will go to jail. Right now we have 1 in 11 African Americans in prison, but our nation can only say the same about 1 in 45 whites. Nobody sees the problem with that? Quebec's McGill University is one of the most elite schools in North America, and to walk through their campus is to see way more Caucasians than African Canadians. This is true of all Ivy League schools. American whites have the second highest education level of any racial demographic, and they were also the second wealthiest. While African American households earned an average of $30,939 in 2005, whites walked away with only $10,000 less than twice that. The reason for this is simple: privilege. Though many whites come here with little or no money and live in rough neighborhoods, some are lifted out of this disadvantage within a generation and are soon living an upper-middle-class lifestyle. Millions of the poor are still white, but so what? Generally speaking, in America, whites live a disproportionately advantaged life where things are simply handed to them. Whites turn on the TV and they see Captain Kirk driving a spaceship. When they retold he's a fictional character, they jump to real-life astronaut Neil Armstrong. Whites are unfairly overrepresented in science, medicine, law, finance, education, and virtually everything that generates wealth. They are probably drastically overrepresented in Nobel Prizes, especially the men. These arrogant crackers may not publicly flaunt a racist moniker such as model majority, but who knows how they speak in the privacy of their own homes. As a people, white people need to recognize they got where they are, not by the virtue of hard work, but by stepping on the backs of others. Many of us think paying reparations is an impossible task, but we should at least be willing to join the conversation and admit, as Obama put it, "You didn't T-bill that." We need to recognize that our position is innately unfair. We need to acknowledge we are lucky, and most importantly, we need to stop it right now. White privilege is, if you will, an invisible knapsack of unearned perks and benefits that a white person is able to unpack wherever we go. White privilege is very, very real, and yet nobody's talking about it. Whites can purchase real estate in virtually every neighborhood they want. Nobody worries about property values when a white person moves in the neighborhood. When asking for a loan or writing a check, a white person never has to be concerned with how he or she will be perceived. Whites can say swear words or wear secondhand clothes without anyone assuming it's due to poverty or illiteracy. When driving a nice vehicle in a bad part of town, a white person rarely has to worry about being pulled over. Even when he does get pulled over, he never wonders if it's because of his race, unless he's in a nice car in a bad part of town. If a rich white person gets into a good school, other students don't assume it's because of affirmative action. A wealthy, well-dressed white person with no tattoos can listen to rap music very loudly on a boombox while riding the New York subway without anyone wondering if they were going to get stabbed. When one opens the discourse to this taboo, we learn many terms that had previously been ignored. Earned strength is very different from unearned power. Whites are overprivileged and enjoy this unacknowledged power in a totally incognizant way. Privilege can look like power when it is in fact permission to escape or dominate. You don't need round eyes to see that simply by the virtue of their success, whites are seriously and systematically oppressing people of color, and not only the yellow ones. To be overrepresented in a field is to dominate those who are not proportionately represented. Whether whites know it or not, simply existing can be tantamount to a hate crime. The white farmers in Rhodesia found this out the hard way, as so they should. So what do? How do we change the latent inequality that white people exploit? Should we be penalized? Yes. The first thing we have to do is get some more communication going. Using your voice is the first step to raising awareness, not just parochially but in a transnational sense. We need to redesign social systems where whites are not 75% of everything in this country. We need to ignore the majority and uplift the masses. By staying cloaked in the myth of meritocracy, we are denying the latent power of the underprivileged. Look at Dresden, Germany today, and look at Detroit. While white cities are constantly flooded with opportunities to rebuild, cities of color are left to rot. I've never heard whites discuss white power in public, but you know they were constantly thinking it. How can they not? This false notion of pride is rammed down their throats everywhere they go. Sportscasters may not say they are filled with joy and pride when they see an athlete they like, but you can tell that's what they were thinking. Sure, using the phrase chink in the armor will get you fired, but that's because whites have dominated sports until very, very recently. I mean, come on. White people invented Nazis. Let's work together to break the silence. A drop in the bucket seems small until you see all the ripples it makes. To tackle white privilege and bring them down to the subpar level of success almost every other group faces, we need systemic change on a global level. Our government needs to get involved. Tax dollars have to be used, and you can be sure jobs will be created. White success has been stolen, not earned, and it's up to these same privileged masses to give back the power and eradicate this unfair system of advantage. We need to transform society to the point where whites' problems don't pale in comparison to those of the less privileged. There doesn't everything make more sense when this logic is only applied to whites? Asians face the same disadvantages all non-whites face, especially when it comes to humor. The questions are complicated, but the answers are simple. If whites accomplish too much, they probably cheated. If anyone else succeeds, it's due to hard work. Conversely, if anyone's doing badly, it's most likely a white person's fault and not that particular person's. Now that we know these truths to be self-evident, it's time to do everything we can, including the immediate massive expansion of government programs, to force this truth to become a reality no matter the cost.